I watched 201 team fights over 14 games between Bronze and GM, and I found some interesting info along the way. A lot of it is kind of what I expected, but it can potentially help you improve your own gameplay and see what high rank players are doing differently compared to what people do in your own rank. The different stats I tracked were time length of team fights, who got the first pick, who used the first ult, who won the fight, how many ults were used, and if a team soft reset during the fight. This will help answer a few questions such as how likely you are to win after a first pick, how often you will win using the most ults, does using an ult first help you win more fights, and what decisions are GM players making that lower ranks are. The first data point I wanted to look into was time between fights. Each rank you go up adds about a little bit more than a second of grouping up time and staging your team before the fight even starts. That tiny amount of extra time to group up and decide a route to take to the fight can be the difference between a fight win and a loss, because the lower rank you go, the more likely players are to go in on their own before the team gets there and die, costing them the next fight. It's very rare to see GM players caught out before the team fight actually start and die. The opposite is true for team fight length. Team fights last forever in Bronze because they hardly ever fully regroup. Even when there's a break between team fights, it's often too short. They average over a minute in length, and not only because they can't finish their kills, but because they don't have an understanding of when to go in and when not to. This does seem to get better by the time they get to Silver, where team fight length is pretty consistent from Silver to Diamond at around 44 seconds. Once you get to Masters, team fights start to get quicker again. They average 36 seconds in Masters and 29 seconds in GM. These ranks really know how to take advantage of getting a pick and capitalizing on it. They are also more mechanically skilled and are more likely to be able to outdamage the healing that is put out by the supports more consistently, resulting in kills. As you'll see later, these ranks also like to soft reset more often, which could result in shorter team fights because all it takes is a kill or two, or an ult being used and the team will back out and reset because they know it's going to be a losing fight. Going into soft reset percentage, I only saw a Bronze team soft reset once out of 23 team fights that I watched. It did stay pretty consistent between Silver to Plat, and then starting in Diamond, players will soft reset more often. This is a really valuable tactic to help you win more fights. Far too often in lower ranks, somebody will get picked off very early, but the team fight will still go on. Imagine you're on attack on Eichenwald and somebody dies right at the bridge to Junkrat spam. You could push in 4v5, or you can wait 10 seconds for them to get back and try again, and have a much better chance of winning. This is especially important at the end of a round. Let's say there's 45 seconds left on your attack, and you're just going into a team fight and somebody dies. If you continue your attack, you take the last fight 4v5. Otherwise, you can wait that 15 seconds and still have a team fight. That would be your last chance for the round at 5v5. This decision making and the call to regroup is part of what separates lower ranked players from higher. Well, that begs the question, just how hard is it to win a 4v5? Over all the ranks, the average I found was about 71.5% win rate if you're the team with 5 or got the first pick. That is including fights where you traded 1 for 1 but got the kill first, or the player you killed got resurrected immediately, or the other team used more ults than you during the fight. That is how important getting that first kill can be. So if you get picked first and decide to go in 4v5, you now only have a 28% chance of winning that fight, based on what I've found. That's why it's important to group up. Like I said, even if you get a kill and you get res right away, you're still at a pretty decent advantage. It puts res on cooldown, so if you have a Mercy of your own, you still have yours available and they don't. Or you could take advantage of the small time you are 4v5 and start making it hard for them to catch up on healing. Then when they're going for the res, it takes a few seconds to fly over, start the animation, and then they can go back to healing. So for that small window, you're actually up 5v3. So you can really do some damage, or even pick off the Mercy while she's vulnerable going for the res. You'll often see players die while Mercy's rezzing because she can't heal during that window of time. If you take out Bronze and Silver ranks, the win rate jumps up even further to 78%. So you really need to understand when a fight is lost and potentially save your resources. For example, if your team is down 1 and you have an ult like Coalescence or Valkyrie, probably don't want to use it. Adding just some extra sustain in the 4v5 just means the fight's going to take a little bit longer, but you're probably going to lose in the end. If you have something like Nanoblade instead, it may be worth trying to flip the fight in your favor, because that alone is a fight winning combo. We will look at the percentage of fights won with more ults than the other team, in just a minute, but looking at fights 1, where the other team got the first pick, but you use more alts, improves your chance from winning 28% of the time to 57% of the time. So over-alting is the best way to turn around a fight if you really need to win it. So if it's an important fight, it might be better to go for it and use more alts. But again, you have to use more than the enemy team to get this percentage. And it's still only slightly better than 50-50. It also puts your alt economy in a bad state for fights coming up, where you could use your alts in a 5v5 fight for a better chance of winning. Since you have a better than 50% chance of winning a fight where you're down by over-alting, that would mean that alt economy is probably more important than first picks to win a fight, and the data does back that up. Across all ranks, except for bronze, the win rate is pretty consistent around 79% if you use more alts than the enemy team. Or it's about 75% if you keep bronze players in the stat pool. This means it's super important to make sure you aren't blowing your alt after a team fight is already won or already lost. I'd see a lot of alts being used in a 3v5 or even 1 or 2v5 in lower ranks. Throwing away your alts like this takes away your chance of getting a close to guaranteed fight win if you have more than the enemy team. Or it gives the other team a guaranteed fight win over you because they can just press Q and win. This is also just looking at alts being used, not how they're used. So even if you miss a pulse bomb, it still gives your team a better chance to win. You can force out Lamp, Suzu, even something as small like Hanzo Leap or Moira Fade, which could potentially cost them their life if they get pushed without having those cooldowns. So just because your ult doesn't get a kill, doesn't mean it didn't get any value. For example, I'm an awful Genji player. So when I do play him and I blade, my whole goal is kind of just to get out Beat or Transcendence. Then we can use Grav or Flux or Visor or whatever other ults we have to potentially get kills because they don't have the support ult. So just because I didn't get any kills with it doesn't mean it didn't get any value because it used some of their resources. I also wanted to go over why bronze is an outlier in these stats. Bronze fights, from what I've seen, are really a coin flip. You can get a kill, but your team can't capitalize on it by getting a team wipe because the time to kill is too long. You can use more ults than the enemy team, but it doesn't matter because you use them in a 2v4. What seems to be the biggest factor for winning bronze team fights is spawn advantage. Since they hardly seem to group up and players keep trickling in back to the fight, whoever's able to get back most quickly will have more chances to get a random kill here and there than win the war of attrition. Also, the first pick win rate does trend slightly up by rank, meaning the higher ranked players are more likely to capitalize on the 5v4 advantage, but the most alt used trend line, if bronze is taken out, is basically flat, meaning no matter what rank you are, alts are your best way to win a team fight. I was also curious if alting first had any impact on who won a fight, and the results were kind of interesting. If you take out Masters and GM, you have a 53% chance of winning a fight just based on alting first. This could be alting when it's an even fight, after you're up, or when you're down a player. So it's basically a coin flip if you're going to win or lose. However, this average jumped to 74% in Masters and GM fights. I believe this is because they're less likely to waste their ults and use them more proactively to get a kill, setting them up for that 5v4 advantage. In the lower ranks, it's still an advantage at 53%. And again, if we take out bronze and just look at silver to diamond, the win rate's up to 57%. So even in these ranks, it's still good to be proactive with ults, but it could more so be the case that they're using something like Coalescence or Valkyrie first if their tank is losing an HP battle, just to bring the fight back to 50-50, instead of something like Kitsune Rush to give your whole team more damage to get a pick. But I didn't really track which ults were being used when, so this is just a theory. In the end, the big takeaways from this data is that you can make decisions like a GM player that don't require any more skill to help you improve at the game. Even if you're in the middling ranks and think that you know these things already, you can be even better at them. Actively think about if you should reset, if a fight's winnable, losable, 50-50, already won or already lost, and if you should or shouldn't use your ults. Take the extra second or two to make sure you're fully regrouped instead of a player just a couple seconds behind. Proactively use your ults to try and get a first pick by ulting before the other team to secure that 5v4 advantage. And track ults on the enemy team. Think about which ults were used in the last fight, ask your team if there were any you missed to get a better picture of how many ults you have compared to them. Everything I've gone over can be done by a player at any skill level. There isn't any mechanical difficulty in regrouping or communicating to reset. So if you're trying to get better, these are the things that you should check to make sure you're doing well if you want to improve quickly. And if you think you are doing them well, see if you can do them just slightly better. Alright, that's it for me. I hope you found this data as interesting as I did. Thanks for watching. Peace out.